Hello, folks. This is Dr. Daniel Jude, and I would like to take some time to go over this survey this week and the discussion board for week 8. This is the third discussion board um, that we've had, and as always, discussion boards are participation grades, and just kind of get your feedback on what's going on with the content itself. I've read over the discussion, so I'm going to go over a video version of it. And the first thing you notice, and several people have emailed me about, is it looks like immediately when you take a look at this survey, it's almost completely in Spanish, but on second gander, you can just take a look and you can see, there are English speaking parts highlighted here. The reason this is this survey is aimed at a Spanish speaking population, so it completely makes sense and desirable even that the primary language is Spanish because the people that are taking the survey are Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers, first language. So that said, completely makes sense that it's written in Spanish first and English second. It is a mere inconvenience to people that are primary English speakers who it's not meant for. So let's go through and go ahead and go over the assignment itself before we hit it. So discussion board this week, you want to provide feedback on the survey instrument that was used, right? So you can read here, the purpose is to provide trauma-informed service to increase both knowledge of domestic violence and improve well-being in clients. So now we know the purpose. So we're going to gauge our evaluation on, does the survey fulfill the purpose that what it's meant to be fulfilled, right? And this is again, the purpose is to increase both knowledge of domestic violence and improve well-being in clients. Okay. So this project relies on non-probability sampling methods, and researchers recruit subjects through community-based organizations that provide trauma-based service to address domestic violences. So the sampling kind of explains that these communities, community-based organizations. So we kind of know that because the survey respondents were clients of trauma-informed services, that it's going to be most of the people taking it are going to have some sort of trauma involved. It's a non-experimental one-group pre-test, post-test design. So there's a pre-test, you take a survey on the pre-test, and then there's a post-test, which you take a survey again and to see if there's any kind of results after the intervention. So, there's going to be a pre-test, which is probably what you see on the survey. And then there's going to be a post-test, which is after the intervention, whatever the intervention has, to be asked the same questions and see if the answers change. So variables of interest, the independent variable intervention includes education. So now we know it's a pre-test, post-test design. So the intervention, so this is what happens in between pre-test and post-test, much like your A/B designs that you're doing. Interventions will be education, safety planning, and group support. And of course, the dependent variables are domestic violence and overall well-being. And you are to pose strengths and weaknesses based on Engel and Schutt on the survey construction. And then there's quite a few comments down here that I went over and agreed with. I want to particularly call this one out. There's a strong anti-woman's bias in reading these questions. And that does come out in the survey. We'll get to that when we get to that. So let's go over the survey. So we're going to read it in English because we know English speaking primarily, or at least I'm an English speaking primary. So today's date, simple enough, fill in the date. So far, so good. Are you a member of a native group? Okay. It's a yes or no question. Code at 0 to 1, no problem. Moving forward. So what is your employment status? Again, we're asking, full-time, self-employed, etc. No problem so far. What is the highest grade? We're asking for education. Again, we're gathering independent variables is what we're doing. Where were you born? And it's going to ask you where were you born, or outside in the country or outside of the country. Again, the 0 to 1 coding. How long have you lived in the United States? How long have you lived in Louisville? Are you currently living with a partner? It's asking in years and months. And how well do you speak Spanish? Okay, and this gives you a 1 to 4 scale. Okay. Notice how the scale is still 1 to 4 down here, which is a good thing. What is your main form of transportation? What we call these kind of questions, these are what you call demographic questions, and it's kind of getting a feel of who are the people that we're talking to, you know, kind of identifying all those people that we're talking to. And remember earlier, um, when I went over data and how data tells a story, um, kind of describes that. So how well do you speak English? And my partner is, you know, man, woman, transgender, no partner. I prefer not to answer. I really dislike this option right here on any survey. Um, you can put an other in there if you want, but I don't like to give people the ability to just not answer a question, um, because it kind of disqualifies them as entry, especially if this is an important variable. If you want to, you can put a I don't prefer to answer and then kick them, because there are options to in surveys. Let's say you have programs like, let's say at number 12, if I gave them this choice and they preferred not to answer, then I could just kick them out, because if that was the main variable of the survey and it was absolutely needed to perform it, then they're just wasting their own time by answering it, and they're also wasting the time of the people giving the survey. So the whole purpose of that survey is to get these informations. So just a little call out on my part. Now we're going to switch over to a 10-point scale. And one of the things that you really need to notice here, and this is like confusing for some people, okay? This is a huge problem. First, we have a 10-point scale. Well, first we have this 4-point scale. Then we have this 10-point scale, okay? All things considered, how satisfied are you with your life as a whole today? The question's not a problem. The scale, not a problem. The problem is we're using different scales. Now we're going to become another issue here in a minute. Notice how it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, do you and your partner work at arguments with much difficulty, some difficulty, no difficulty? For some reason, they reverse the scale here. It goes, instead of going 1, 2, 3, it suddenly switches gears and goes 3, 2, 1. They could have easily reversed this and put 1 as no tension on the left side, 2 as some tension, and 3. Now, what this is going to do is, because people and typically go into cruise control and don't read everything, you're going to get some people mixing up their answers here, almost guaranteed. Which is going to mess with your own data, and it's going to just throw results out the window. So this is a problem. You want to make sure your scales are consistent. So, now we're going to go, do you and your partners work out arguments with 3, 2, 1, much difficulty, some difficulty, no difficulty? In general, how well do you feel you are coping with the day-to-day demands of parenthood? And we, for some reason, switch gears again, with 1 being very well, but, according to their other, the other scales of 3 would be the a lot answer, but the a lot answer here is 1. And also, we've gone back to 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 3, 2, 1. We've kind of swapped scales again, and it's just for some reason they did 3, 2, 1 here. During the past month, how often have you felt your child and children are much difficult to care for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Never, rarely, sometimes, usually, always. Again, the answers and the questions aren't an issue currently. So during the past month, how often has he or she felt they'll do things that bother you a lot? Again, just asking about partners and measurements, which is fine. During the past month, how often have you felt angry with he, him, him? I'm getting tongue twisted. Him, her, them. So, cool. All that is in good order. The scale is pretty good. So let's move on to another thing. So please indicate how true you think each statement is. So we got false, somewhat true, and true. Domestic violence does not affect many people. Now this is measuring attitude, okay? We're looking particularly for the attitude of the person involved. So what is their perception, okay? We don't care what's actually true. We just care what this person's perception is. When a man is violent, it's because he lost control of his temper. Okay? If a woman continues living with a man who beats her, then it is his own fault that she is beaten again. Making a man jealous is asking for it. Some women unconsciously want their partner to control them. A lot of domestic violence occurs between women and keep arguing about things about the partner. And as you see, this whole question section is measuring what attitudes they have. Okay? Now, we don't know if they're testing a theory here or not. Going back to this is, definitely written as like anti-woman. For this, But there's also a viewpoint that because it is measuring the attitude of the person, maybe they're measuring forms of, I guess, sort of like a Stockholm syndrome, seeing if they blame themselves or not for the domestic violence, as opposed to like putting the onus of the blame on the person that's violent. Remember, we're looking at their perception, and if they are testing for something um, that uh, they're really looking for people that blame themselves, then this will come out in this form of test writing. However, for those that don't blame themselves, put the onus of blame on the abusive partner, then you might see that come out in a different way. Could they have tested this better? Probably. Um, to take this section for what it's worth, but it does have a lot of abusive men lose control so much they don't know what they're doing. It has a lot of like blame shifting, which is not a healthy thing. But I said the other side, which I don't know what their objective would be with these questions, especially if they're going back to this objective. Okay, realize purpose is to increase both knowledge of domestic violence and improve well-being in clients. If their objective is to improve well-being in clients, then maybe they are looking for clients that do blame themselves, which is a take. But I don't know what their original researchers were thinking when they were writing these questions, and both kind of puzzled and also don't know what they were doing. As in, I don't know personally what they were doing, what their objective was, other than trying to improve the well-being of the clients. So, again, going back to the scales, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, they are consistent here at the very least. Still, I'm going to make my complaint of the scales reversing. So, another thing, we start at 0 here for some reason, okay? And I don't think any scale before this has started at 0. No, this is the first introduction of 0. So this is a critique, because it's none, which is fine. 0, none. This might throw some people off, especially because people will be zipping through these. And there are ways to dispose of surveys that are completed too quickly, but the paper surveys that are completed too quickly, they go in with the rest of the pile. But for like online surveys, for example, if someone completes your survey in like 10 minutes or less, you can completely disregard it. You have that option in your settings. It just kind of throws it in the trash because it was completed too quickly. With the thought that they didn't really have time to think about it. Or some surveys, if you complete them, you'll get money for them. There are survey options where you can, like, let's say they complete it in 22 minutes or less, then they don't get paid at all, and it throws the survey in the trash. So, moving forward with this, the questions below ask about things that might have bothered you. For each question, circle the number that best describes how much or how often you have been bothered by each problem during the past 2 weeks. Little interest or pleasure in doing things, rarely, several, more than days, nearly every day you get, bothered by this. So severe, moderate bother, mild bother, slight bother. Again, the questions below ask how much these might have bothered you. So how much you've been bothered by each problem. Feeling down, hopeless, depressed. So you can say, I was depressed nearly every day. Feeling anxious, worried, warm, panic. This is kind of getting the emotion and the feel of the domestically abused partner. Unexplained backaches and pains, more bothers, feelings that your illness are not taken care of. It's just in general checking how they're feeling. And we have the same scale here. The instructions: please answer the following questions. This has not happened. And yes, this has happened. So you can say it bothers me when people are pressured me to assimilate to the American way of doing things. This has not happened. And if this has happened, you can shift over here and say, if so, rate how stressful it was for you. And then if it has happened, you can say, this was stressful or this was not stressful. Or, not stressful at all, rather, to very stressful. I think you got to go down this question. It bothers me when people don't respect my Hispanic Latin values. For example, familialism. Because of my culture, you got the hiccups. Because of my cultural background, I have a hard time fitting in with whites. You know, I feel uncomfortable with other things, other when others expect you to know American way of doing things. So you can go through these questions. I feel uncomfortable when I have to choose between Latin, Hispanic, and American way of doing things. People look down on me if I practice. And as you can see, there's just a bunch of this has happened, or I have felt this way before, or I have not felt this way before, and then how intense was the feeling, as in not at all stressful or extremely stressful after that. Let's take a look here. Go back to the instructions. Please answer the following questions. The issue here, the questions aren't bad. The issue here is you may have to explain how this works here, right? The arrow might not do a good enough job. Let's say that people, oh, this has happened, and check mark, and they don't know what to do with this, which is entirely possible. You may get a section where this is just not answered at all, or maybe they don't understand this section at all and they skip it, which is worse, right? Um, Survey fatigue. This is a pretty long survey. It was brought up in a number of comments. Oh, hey, this is a very overwhelming and long survey. Get to the point, kind of deal. And I do agree. Maybe a 70+ question survey. I think this is 70. Yeah, 70 questions. Survey might be a little bit too much, especially when you're talking about abuse, right? So, next part. You may be facing a variety of different challenges of safety. When we use the word safety in the next set of questions, we mean safety from an emotional abuse by another person. Please circle the number, the best describes how you and your family safety right now. When you're responding to these questions, it is fine to think about your family safety along with what your own as usually do. So very nice instructions there. So we're back down at 0 because there's a never value here. And 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes true, half the time, mostly true, always true. So we can assume, because this is half the time true, that sometimes true means less than half the time, which is not a very good way to word it as well. You need to be very specific on that instead of like assuming that people will put the logic together that because half the time is under sometimes, that sometimes is actually less than half the time. So, just a little language thing. The way you word things is very important, especially because you can't assume people think like you do. I can cope with whatever challenges come at me I'm stuttering. I can cope with whatever challenges come at me as I work to keep safe, and answer that how you feel. I have to give it too much to keep safe. Answer that how you feel, and so on and so forth. I know what to do in response to threats to my safety. I know what my next steps are to path to keeping me safe. So these are measuring things. This whole survey, the whole purpose is measuring people's safety, their level of education on how to get safe if they're not safe, so on and so forth, and their capability even, right? Maybe some of these abused partners are hopeless in their situation, and this will definitely reflect through in this survey, especially if they're like shifting the blame onto themselves, which will be revealed through the survey. Is one of the sections very sensitive to what's going on? Probably not, and that could be changed, and it could be worded differently, and I agree with that. So let's move forward here. It's just kind of measuring when something doesn't work. I can try something else. I feel comfortable asking for. This is a big one. How comfortable you are for reaching out for help. When I think about keeping safe, so like I think this section is very adherent to the goals of trying to how capable or how capable are these folks are willing to get help when they need it. And right here, this section up here, again, it's kind of measuring, I believe, a level of hopelessness, but it could be something different. But then because it's questionable, it has a big question mark attached to like the purpose here. Then this could be written better in whole. This is a good one right here, feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. Sometimes, people don't even know they're feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. So even a question asking so directly will not hit the mark, which is why you have to ask a bunch of other questions regarding it. And I think that wraps it up. I think the survey overall had good intentions. It might have missed the mark a little bit here and there. I would love to actually see the results of the survey. I haven't. And I think that wraps up this recording for the survey, and then I'm going to do another recording on the final projects I was planning on getting out next week. And then after that, that probably ends the course. So Have a good summer from here on out. Well, I'll have another video up for you next week. Later.